Hi, I'm Anna Milan from the Community Services Department. Today we're discussing Chatham's North Beach and North Beach Island with Harbormaster Jason Holm. Chatham's North Beach is a current formation of the barrier beach that has protected Chatham Harbor and the mainland from the open ocean for many years. Over the years, weather events and erosion have created many changes in the area. The current North Beach is attached to Nauset Beach to the north and is accessible by oversand vehicles or by boat. To the south of North Beach is North Beach Island. It is flanked by the north and south inlets and is accessible only by boat. These two areas are part of the Cape Cod National Seashore and are extremely fragile and dynamic natural areas. They are a valuable resource to the boating public, property owners, and wildlife. In addition to providing storm protection to Chatham, they are also very popular recreation areas. Chatham's North Beach and North Beach Island are protected by federal, state, and town regulations. Oversight of these areas is provided by the town of Chatham. Hi Jason, how are you?
I'm well, how are you?
I'm great, I'm happy to be here with you today. Thanks for taking the time.
Oh, appreciate it.
We've got a lot to talk about. We're
Yes.
almost through our normal summer and into local summer. How excited are you?
Pretty excited. Always exciting to have the vibe of a lot of people around, but by the end of the summer, we're kind of ready to have things a little more quiet.
I bet you'll be excited to pull into work and not worry about parking, because
Yes.
I've been down at the Fish Pier recently and it's been brutal.
It's the Fish Pier's had probably some of the largest crowds in recent memory down there this year, so definitely a noticeable uptick in visitors this year.
Great. How's the fleet doing?
Fleet's catching fish, so that's always a good thing. A little bit of a slow start for a few fisheries, but they seem to kind of be in their midsummer stride right now. So
good. I'm glad to hear that. I know a lot of my friends are having fun out there. A couple of boats on their first season, and they're enjoying it. So that's always nice.
That's
to see.
great.
Yeah. How was the 4th of July down at the Fish Pier?
Really busy. It was typically the 4th is a busy holiday, but not quite as busy as Labor Day, and we saw some pretty substantial crowds this year. That coupled with some pretty inclement weather and a lot of boating traffic made for a challenging day, but overall we ended up with a few minor incidents. And given the amount of people, boats, and weather, I feel pretty fortunate that nothing worse happened.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a pretty foggy July, but I feel like not as bad as recent years have been, which has probably been nice for you guys down in the harbor.
It is, but we still, anytime the fog comes in, that's an uptick for us in cases. So, we've had several kind of recalls this year back for lost and disoriented vessels in the fog. Yeah. So that's a fairly common thing this time of year. So less fog's always good for us.
Absolutely. So. As we start approaching Labor Day, our next busy holiday weekend, how do you ensure boaters are aware of the safety guidelines and make sure that they follow them?
So we really enjoy educating the public. So, when our patrol boats are out, educate in lieu of enforcement is usually our top priority. Most of the times when people make a mistake or don't have the right safety equipment, it's not an intentional thing. So we really try to take those opportunities to educate each boater on what they need for their vessel. We partner with the local Coast Guard station as well. They conduct their boardings and kind of pass along the same things. The biggest thing that I could kind of pass along to a lot of boaters that they may not be aware of is that there is a difference between the state requirements for vessels and the federal. So you should always check your local bylaws and waterways regulations to be familiar with those, as well as the state carriage requirements for each vessel, and those can be found on the Mass Environmental Police website.
Great. What are some of the more common boating safety mistakes that you've seen in the Chatham Harbor?
It depends on the time of year, but without fail, proper life jackets really is got to be up there. You have to have a properly fitting life jacket for each person on board that's in good condition. Additionally, especially during these holidays like the 4th of July and Labor Day, we see an increase in overloaded vessels. So each vessel is only allowed to carry so many persons or so much weight. So we really try to keep an eye on that, as well as some impaired boaters from time to time. But I would say life jackets and overloaded vessels are probably the top two that we see.
Sure, and aside from the obvious ways to avoid that, which would be having the proper life safety equipment and not overloading the boat, what are ways that those problems can be avoided if someone has decided to move forward with, having an overloaded boat? What could they do if they're...
Those are tough, because if we come across it and we're out underway, the large majority of the time we'll escort them back to the dock where they came from, try to allow them to make trips across if they're ferrying across to the island, for instance. If they're just overloaded and going out for the day, then they have to stay there. If it's a life jacket issue, they can run to the store and grab some more. But those are just non-starters for boats getting underway that create a manifestly unsafe voyage, and that's just something that wouldn't be allowed.
Sure. And people traveling out to North Beach Island, I'm a frequent flyer out there. I love taking the boat out and going and enjoying the open beach, but it can be a tricky path. The harbor is a very interesting waterway. There are a lot of new routes that need to be taken, and especially when considering the tide changes, it can be a little tricky. What would you want boaters to keep in mind when they're making that journey on a busy day?
Really taking a look at the weather, tides, and currents, and just being aware that Chatham's unlike any other waterway. It's, oftentimes you can at least prepare a little bit for what may be ahead of you. Ensuring that your vessels has all the required safety equipment, that you have proper communications, whether it's cell phone or VHF, and also to if you let someone know where you're going. We used to call it a float plan, but that also allows someone to know where you're going and roughly what time you're going to be back. In the event something happens, there would at least be someone knowing that you're not accounted for at that time.
Absolutely. What advice would you give to the novice boater who's, maybe taking their first trip out over a busy holiday weekend? What are some things that they might need to keep in mind when doing that?
I'd recommend going at high tide and really trying to go with someone, if possible, that's more experienced in the area. This is a very unfavorable area for novice boaters to operate, especially those unfamiliar with the area. So it's a very challenging environment for those folks. So, high water, follow the buoys, and if you have someone that's familiar with the area, try to tag along with them. Great.
And for the experienced boater who's out on the water, what are some things that maybe they could be keeping their eyes out for to either identify to the Harbormaster staff or to maybe help their fellow boater? Like, what are some things that they should be keeping their eye out for?
Well, quick reporting is really a huge advantage. If you see something, say something. Mm-hmm. So if something looks off, report it. If there's a buoy that looks like it may be off station, or if there's an obstruction in the water or an overloaded vessel or any other type of incident that doesn't look right, give us a call. Oftentimes that can be the difference between resolving something before it happens and reacting to something afterwards.
Absolutely. And the water's not the only unsafe part about the Cape and the Chatham area. The fish pier isn't working commercial fish pier. What are some things that people need to keep in mind when they are visiting to enjoy, or whether it's to get lunch or to be ferried over to the island?
Stay out of the parking areas and use the crosswalks. That's recently we've had the crosswalks added. We had the observation deck expanded upon and rebuilt. Those are the areas to where we highly encourage visitors to be in. The active offloading areas are inherently dangerous, not only for the workers, but it's even worse when we have visitors encroach on those areas. So we have a limited fish pier staff. They do a great job of trying to monitor those things, but it's a lot of people, it's a lot of area. And so we kindly ask that people respect the signs that are down there, to stay in the walkways on the observation deck and kind of out of the parking lots in the loading deck areas.
Yeah, sure. It can get really hectic down there, especially
Yes.
when people are ferrying to and from the island or having to take multiple trips. When approaching the docks, or if people are standing and waiting on the docks, what's best practice for both safety and to respect the commercial fishermen as well as your other recreational boaters around there?
Just maintain your situational awareness and be courteous.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes if you've got your head buried in your phone, you're not seeing something come in. you can overcrowd the docks or the gangways. So just kind of being aware of where you're at, what the environment is, and just being courteous to everyone down there is typically a fairly good recipe for having a safe trip down.
Sure. How are you and your staff preparing for the influx of Labor Day visitors? Are there any new safety protocols in place or rules or regulations that people need to be aware of?
I wouldn't say anything new. Labor Day traditionally has been probably the busiest weekend of the year for us. So we'll always try to increase staff and run additional patrols in potential areas where there's high volumes of boats or people. So we'll continue that this year. Given some of the more recent events out on North Beach Island, certainly we'll have a stronger emphasis on that area as far as patrolling those waters in and around there. But Chatham has 66 miles of coastline. It's a lot of area to cover, so we'll do our best to have boats in a reasonable response time to everywhere within town.
Great. And you said that you are working closely with the Coast Guard. Of course, you're sharing the water. How can people get into contact with you or the Coast Guard, and when do people know who would be the more appropriate person to call?
Really, if you're calling in a distress on the VHF radio, channel 16, the Coast Guard is the lead maritime search and rescue agency, so that should be who you call. However, if there's an issue getting in touch with them, we're always there. We always monitor the conversations and we always respond as they're going on. Absent a VHF radio, 911 is not a bad option to call either, because they can ping your position and they can get things going. It is a little bit slower in that those notifications kind of take a while to get back to the Coast Guard and the Harbormaster's office, but the benefit is that they have a locked-in location of where you're at. You can also call the Coast Guard station in Chatham or the one sector down in Woods Hole, and all of those I would recommend folks kind of preset their phones to have those numbers in their contact lists, because when it comes time for an emergency, you're really not going to remember 911 or VHF channel 16 Mayday is going to be hopefully what you recall.
Excellent. Jason, can you give me the top 3 safety protocols to keep in mind when boating in Chatham Harbor during Labor Day?
Sure. I would say to ensure that you have all the required safety equipment on your vessel, including life jackets for all people on board. Take a look at the weather prior to departing, especially the tides and the wind conditions. And lastly, to make sure that you have a sober operator capable of operating the vessel. If you're intoxicated and trying to tell someone where to go, that doesn't count. You need to have someone that's actually capable of operating the vessel and navigating it back to safety.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you.